Mr. Carmichael.
Mr. Edward, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. It's been quite a long time since we've been on the podcast.
Yeah, how long has it been?
A couple of months for
Yeah.
sure. I think the last one we done was the Q&A, which was a good episode.
Always love
Yeah,
a Q&A.
love a Q&A.
Can I ask why you're really good today?
Sun is shining.
Mm.
I've had quite a productive week. We had the launch of the new build cycle that kicked off on Monday. We've had a lot of good feedback. What else? It's Friday. Can't complain. Weekend is coming up. We've also got a big event happening for Build this weekend. So it's going to be the Build Training Day, which is tomorrow afternoon. So yeah, I can't complain. I'm also getting really excited for my holidays that are coming up. I'm going on leave 10 days time.
And this will be the first time that you have gone back home, home being Scotland.
Correct.
In how long?
4 years.
That's crazy.
So just to put that into context, like I've not seen my family in 4 years. It's been a very long time. So I'm super excited to go home.
And talk me through the this Build Community Day. What is a Build Community Day?
Yeah, so basically it's an opportunity because obviously Build is an online training program. And we've got people all over the world that do the program, but we've also got a lot of people here in Hong Kong that do the program. But a lot of those people do the program on their own, in a gym. So we decided it would be a great opportunity to bring everyone together and make it just essentially a big training day for everyone. It's an opportunity for them to connect with each other because you know what it's like. You've done like a solo program training on your own. It can be fun, but towards the end it can get quite lonely. So these are just opportunities that we do every single month just to bring our community together essentially.
And what impact have you seen that on the growth of the online business?
Just a lot more, just brings a lot more awareness to the Hong Kong community. I think that we do a very good job of bringing awareness outside of Hong Kong, but we realize that we've got thousands, even millions of people here in Hong Kong. Why not try and serve these people first and then focus on the growth outside?
Yeah, every time we have done a athlete camp or a competition for the process, I think also just everyone being who are kind of online friends who are on a program. You know, we have things like the water cooler or, you know, people are liking and commenting on each other's posts, but 99% of people have never met each other in real life.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and then creating those opportunities for them to actually meet. Like it was even cool today. We had Chris Toise on one of our subscribers who's been a part of the program for 3 years. He came to Coastal and he saw Storm, who's a part of the Build program. And those two have been basically speaking over our online programs on WhatsApp for 3 years, and they saw each other for the very first time today, and it was pretty cool. That's, you know, so they were like, they kind of like ran to each other, hugged each other, and I was like, "Is that the first time you've?" Like, yeah, nuts. So yeah, I think just, you know, and I think the impact that then has when people go back to their homes, knowing that they've kind of just the connection with the people in the program has just gone that another level deeper, just makes them want to be a part of the community even more. Yeah, that's really what, you know, bringing people to that community, like the common, you know what is really interesting? Sorry, complete side tangent, just saying that word community. When I was in Colombia doing a walking tour of like one of the favelas, like the townships, the tour guy said, he kept on saying the word community. He's like, because that's what a community is. It's common unity. And I was like, well, I never broke that word down. And you're right, like, you know, united and you have something in common. That's what brings you guys together.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think just going off that whole concept of building a community, I think that when we first started Build, we didn't really focus too much on the community. We were so focused on nailing the product, which is a kind of, you've got to go down that road first, right? You've got to have a really good product and then
the product being the program.
Correct. Yep. And then build the community around the product. But now that we think that we've really nailed that product, we can now start to see that community and the impact that we're having through these events and the impact that we're able to have via water coolers and chats, etc. It's really starting to take shape. And essentially it goes back to the mission, which is impact. Right, we're trying to inspire, we're trying to educate, we're trying to impact people to live better lives, essentially, right?
Yeah, I think something that just we are getting more and more clarity on every single day is that the way that we have impact is through connection. You know, in everything that we want to do, even the course that we have coming up soon, you know, we want connection to be a part of that. It's not ever just you know, give us your money, follow the program online and navigate life yourself. Like we want to be a part of that journey somehow.
And I definitely think over the last couple of years, it's became even more like that's what people are craving. I think obviously during COVID, there was none of that. So we literally went from having loads of things that we could do and we kind of took it for granted. we got into COVID, and it was like for 3 years we couldn't run events. People couldn't go to the gym. You were literally, and if you were lucky, maybe you were living with some family, but on the flip side, you could have been living on your own for the past 3 years, and you've had minimal connection for 3 years. That really starts to play on you. So I guess now people are really gravitating more towards connection and building communities, etc.
Liam, I want to change gears a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I have you here today is to talk about something you just recently posted on Instagram. I have this post right in front of me here.
Let's go.
And in a nutshell, what the post says is, well, the title is 32 years old and in the best shape of my life, strong, jacked, fit AF. You basically document that this is the lightest you've ever been.
Yeah.
But it's also the most muscle mass you've ever had and at the lowest body fat you've ever had.
Correct.
And then you kind of document and share kind of what has gone into this. And that's kind of what I want us to talk about today. My first question to you is, what inspired you to make that post?
Well, I think it was I think there's it's being vulnerable, right? It's sharing your story, hoping that can maybe resonate with someone. I think going back to one of my main missions and values, it really is to inspire people to make the change in their life. So I know by me sharing my story, hopefully that's either going to resonate or that's going to inspire someone to maybe take action in their own life to better their circumstances or whatever that's going to be. So I guess that was the intention behind it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what actually went into this transformation, because I think would you call it transformation? When you set out to make these changes, and I think you put a date on here. You put a date which is
March 20th.
March 20th. So talk me through what happened on March 20th.
Yeah, so I guess we have been doing a lot of content for Build. We just got a new content creator here at Coastal Fitness a couple of months ago. So March 20th, it was like we were making a lot of content. And I kind of went home one day and I looked at myself in the mirror and I wasn't happy with what I saw. Now, of course, people would say, oh yeah, he's still jacked, he's still got muscle, he's still the build guy. But I knew deep down, I kind of let my standards slip. That's what I say in the post. I had got comfortable being comfortable, right? I got kind of lazy with my nutrition, kind of got lazy with my fitness, wasn't really committed to anything, and kind of using that as a crutch to why I wasn't, that was a crutch in my head that I was using to why I wasn't hitting the standard that I wanted to hit. Does that make sense?
So can I ask though, what was what triggered the introspection? Was it you looked at yourself in the mirror and it was an aesthetic thing where you didn't like the way that you looked, and then you went down this rabbit hole of unraveling everything?
Yep.
Or was it that you had noticed that you'd dropped your standards in things that maybe you'd previously held standards to, and as a result, your body comp? So what was the kind of order?
Yeah, I think great question. I think it was a kind of mix of both. One, definitely aesthetics. I knew that I could be looking better than what I was. And second, the reason that I wasn't looking the way I was because I had let those standards slip. So
I'm going to bring you back to the statement, which is, you think you could be looking better. Did you think that you needed to look better? What was the motivator behind looking at you now? And like you said, the majority of the world would look at you and think this guy's in phenomenal shape. And what triggered it? Why at that point in time on March 20th did you look at yourself and think that's not good enough? Was it the fact that you're now creating content and you're going to be going to be in front of a camera and being like the poster boy of Build? Did that have a part to play in it?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It definitely had an impact to why I wasn't happy with what I seen in the mirror. That was definitely one. I guess the second one was, it was just going back to, I was essentially saying, hey, this program is going to look good. It's getting you looking good, feeling great and functioning well. And in my standards, I wasn't looking the best way that I could look. So that was definitely a part to play for sure.
I'm going to keep on dissecting this.
Yeah, please.
And in your standards, for your own standards, no one else's, what is looking good in your head? When you say I wasn't looking good or I could look better.
Probably going, I think it's I wanted to look good naked. I think that's where it really boils down to.
Kind of look better naked.
Yeah, better. That would not look good. It would be looking better naked.
And who's the judge of that?
Myself.
And what are you looking for? I'm sorry because I think these are all things that
really good.
I think these are all things that we all say, but it's I think we rarely actually dig beneath the surface to know where they're coming from.
I mean, I think that's where does it come from? There's definitely ego there for sure, 100%. But I'm okay with that. I guess what else? Yeah, it's in my own eyes, I knew that I could do better. And it was the whole concept of just letting everything, just getting too comfortable. Like I wasn't really looking at my nutrition. I was just like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. Same with my training. Oh yeah, it'll be fine. But actually I wanted to create a culture within Build. Not that everyone has to drop down to 12% body fat. That's not the goal that what I'm trying to do. The goal is that I'm trying to create a culture where people lean into doing challenging stuff. Right? It's like, can you be the best version of yourself? And that's going to mean different things to different people. But for me on March 20th, that meant that I wanted to look better than what I saw in the mirror.
Can I share something that I've been going through recently? So this is really funny. I went to Colombia recently, and as a result, I've basically had like 3 weeks of easy training, much easier than what I'm normally used to. Even quite a lot of rest in there and recovery and things with jet lag and travel. And the last week I was looking in the mirror and thinking, wow, like I've lost muscle. I've gotten a bit puffy, like I can't see my abs. And basically like had a lot of like discomfort, I would say, not so much insecure, but discomfort about the way that I was looking. And, you know, even asking like my girlfriend Cami, like, do you think I've gotten smaller? Like I can hear myself saying it, and it's definitely not the old me, which would have been like obsessive compulsive. I told her the other day that there was points where I would eat a scoop of ice cream and then I would squeeze my body fat on my belly a minute later to see if it had gone bigger. Like how ridiculous is that? And I knew the science that wasn't possible, right? And I'm looking at myself in the mirror right now and I'm thinking, oh my God, like look at like a lost muscle and I've gotten fatter. And I know where this stems from for me, and it stems from the small teenager. This stems from the small kid who didn't want to be the small kid, who was tired of being called cute, who was always in the front row at school, who was like, didn't get picked for sports team because he was too small. And I know that back then triggered my journey with the gym, right? And as much as that relationship has changed and evolved over the years, this last week was like, oh my God, it's still there. Like it's still there, and it's probably going to be there forever, for the forever and ever. So for me, like, you know, I laughed about it in a way. I was like, wow, I said to my girlfriend, like, I definitely still have body dysmorphia. And she said, yeah, you definitely do. She said, you know, I haven't seen it in a long time, but yeah, you know, this whatever's triggered you right now is clearly showing it's still a part of you. And I kind of like laughed about it, and then kind of reminded myself, okay, you know, what is this representing? Like, you know, be happy where you are. We just talked about this outside. You know, I'm actually, there's context to this. You know, like you just been through a tough 3 weeks. Likelihood is your body hasn't really changed, Ed, to be honest. It's just in your eyes because you're looking at yourself under a magnifying glass. So I wanted to share that with you. And like, have you got like a small boy equivalent story? Some like, you know, some trauma from back in the day that triggers you on March 20th to look in the mirror and think, I'm not happy with what I'm seeing?
Well, I guess for me, it was also the fact that it was because I'm saying like, I want to have all these behaviors and I'm doing all these things and I'm living a certain way, but actually behind the mirror, behind the mask, I wasn't doing those things that I was saying I was doing. So there was how would you put that? It was like I was almost guilty that I didn't have my shit together because I was saying I was doing all these things, but actually I wasn't. So when I looked at myself in the mirror, it wasn't like, hey, I want to drop to 12% body fat. That wasn't the intention. The intention was, hey, I looked at myself in the mirror and I'd also recognized everything else that was going on in my life, and I'd seen that everything had started to slip. I was getting lazy, all these things, and maybe that stemmed from when I was younger. Maybe people used to call me too skinny or whatever that was. Like I don't think I've ever had an insecurity where I've felt a lesser human, as in like too small or too skinny, because I've always
there wasn't an insecurity that drove you to fitness.
No, because you've asked me this before, have you always been like lean or skinny? And I would say yes, but I've never been like, oh, I want to get bigger. Like that, there was never an insecurity. It was never driven. Fitness was never driven by that. Fitness was always just driven by, I fucking loved it. And that's what got me into fitness.
So that's interesting now, coming back to the first question, which is, you know, what was it on March 20th when you looked in the mirror? So actually, it wasn't just the way that you looked. It was you did a holistic assessment of everything, right? And I think a lot of it sounds like there was this authenticity part where what you were putting out to the world, you weren't actually doing. And so there was this like guilt and this, I know you're a guy who always wants to be authentic. And so realizing that you probably weren't, you wanted to change. And then I guess the body composition part of it was just the result of your actions.
Of actually getting my shit together. And obviously, yes, I would have loved, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I was like, oh yeah, I could probably lose a wee bit of body fat around the waist. Like, I think that most people look at themselves in the mirror and think, I could probably do a wee bit better there. But that was a representation of me having an extra body fat around the waist. It was a representation that I wasn't doing my behaviors and actions that I said that I was going to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think where we're at right now in your story is a place that many people have been or are right now, which is like identifying that they want to change. They're not happy with their current actions. And maybe that even goes to the extent of the way that they look. What do you do now? So what did you do? You know, we're using you as a case study here. On March 20th, you make that realization that something needs to change. Where did you start?
Well, I guess I just took inventory of where I currently was at. Right. And it was like everything in my life, what's the lowest hanging fruits that I can have like the most return on my investment by putting an action in place, whether that be more steps, whether that be starting to count or track my calories, track my macros, etc. And I realized once I took everything into place, the lowest hanging fruits for me that was going to have the most bang for my buck was increasing my stuff outside of the gym. Because I'm pretty consistent inside the gym. I work in a gym, so it's pretty easy for me to stroll downstairs and start working out. That was the easy part. But I guess just looking at the stuff outside of the gym, like I probably wasn't getting as much activity that I could have got if I wanted to. So I was taking the MTR to and from work. So one of the lowest hanging fruits was, again, increasing the NEAT or the non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
So let's just quickly go. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
but
go.
So you said take inventory, right? So basically the first thing you did was figure out where you're currently at. So in terms of your movement, because you said one of the things you wanted to do is improve your movement. What was your movement at that point in time?
So in terms of steps?
Well, whatever you used to class movement.
Yeah, so I guess it was just looking at how many steps I was actually having throughout my day. And I actually didn't have a tracker at that point. So I was using my phone, and my phone was saying I was like at 6,000 steps. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I do more, because you got to bear in mind that I never carry my phone in my pocket the whole time, especially when I'm coaching. Then I started opening up this conversation. And my client, Mike Zev, he's going to love this. He actually gave me his old Garmin watch to start tracking my steps. So then I realized, well, I'm actually only hitting like 8,000 to 10,000 steps, which is pretty good. That's actually above average in what people are recommending, how many steps you should get per day. But I was like, okay, I want to try and increase that and see if that has an impact on the way I look, for example. So for you guys to know, like I take the MTR to and from work. So the first protocol that I put in place was to stop one MTR station before my house, so I would walk a bit more. So that was giving me like an extra 1,500 to 2,000 steps per day. I'd done that consistently for about 30 days, because I even put up on the wall every month we do monthly goals, and that was one of my goals. So that was like the lowest hanging fruit for me. Let's try and increase my activity outside of the gym.
Okay. Can I ask why you thought you were already at 8,000 to 10,000 steps, which, like you said, in most people's eyes is like, that's a good amount of movement. Why did you think that was one of the lowest hanging fruits that you wanted to improve on?
It was just easy. It was the easiest thing that I could have done right there. It's like, should I add a second session in of training? Should I do more training? I was like, we'll already dedicate 75 to 90 minutes a day to train. It's like, that's a lot of time in the gym. So it's okay, where's another opportunity that I can start increasing my movement outside of the gym? And walking was the easiest one for me.
So I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
So when you say it was the easiest thing to do, I would have just said, surely just eating a little bit less, like half a bowl less of rice would have been easier than having to get off the MTR earlier. And also, which means leaving your house earlier and potentially waking up earlier. Yeah. And also leaving work early. So you're having to create a time and an energy buffer here. So why did you pick that?
Well, I was also tying two birds with one stone, as I wanted to get more sunshine as well. So I wanted to be outside more.
This is what I love. Yeah. Isn't this what's so good about questioning and just breaking shit down?
Yeah. So actually it was like, okay, I wanted to get more sun. I was like, okay, how can I get more sun? I've got quite a busy day. So it was like, okay, there's an opportunity here for me to walk and get more sun. And I knew by increasing well, it wasn't just, you've got to think that was throughout the week, but I wasn't very consistent on the weekends, especially like a Saturday and Sunday. That was 8,000 to 10,000 steps during the week, but when it got to Saturday, Sunday, that dropped down to like 6, 7. So I knew there, especially on the weekends, it was a great opportunity for me to get sun and get my steps in.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, 2 birds in 1 stone. So I'm guessing this probably is going to take us on to our next thing that you identified you wanted to improve on, was more sunlight.
Correct.
Why? Why did you see that as important?
Well, I just wanted the tan, right? That's what really all I wanted. The weather, because this is what it's probably like May, end of May. March. So March, April. The weather was starting to get a bit warmer in Hong Kong. Sun was shining. I was like, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to get a tan in. I can also listen to a podcast. I can listen to some music. I'm getting steps. So it was like this one activity. I was getting loads of benefits from it.
But I think that's so important, right? It's like you're tying other benefits to the habits you're creating, which makes it easier to stick to the habit. You know, you're getting learning. You're getting tans, you're getting an aesthetic pleasure. We also know the benefits of sunlight, especially in the morning as well, and circadian rhythms, testosterone, vitamin D. So doing the research and knowing that by making this small action of getting off the MTR 1 step early and walking, you're actually getting 5 other benefits at the same time, makes it a lot easier to stick with the habit.
So that beautiful, and I think that was one action, and then I think the other lowest hanging fruit was just taking or actually seeing how many calories I was eating throughout the week, because bearing in mind that this time I wasn't tracking my food. I was just kind of winging it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm probably eating enough. I feel full, kind of getting my protein in, but I didn't actually know if I was getting what protein I was getting, how many carbohydrates and how many fats. So I'd done like 2 weeks of tracking from like a Monday all the way through to the Sunday.
Everything. Did you track everything?
Everything. Just to see
even
where
veggies?
I was at. No veggies, unfortunately. Yeah, I didn't put veggies in.
So pretty close. Olive oil? Close. Like if you would cook with oil, would you measure that?
And we use like the spray. So yeah,
can't measure that.
But if it was like, if I was making like roast potatoes, for example, I fucking love roast potatoes. We do them in the air fryer, but I coat them in like avocado oil or olive oil. I would put a teaspoon of oil in there for sure.
Okay, so what happened? What were you far off where you thought you were after measuring for 2 weeks?
So I was probably eating a bit over my maintenance. So I was probably eating about 3,400 calories on average.
And let's just pause. How did you calculate your maintenance?
Well, I took my maintenance from, I first of all I stepped on the in-body. So I took the data that I had. So it spit out some numbers. And then I averaged that over 2 weeks with what I was kind of eating. And it was like, am I gaining weight or am I losing weight? And I wasn't doing either or. So I kind of knew I was sitting at that maintenance level.
Cool. Continue.
So yeah, I got to, we understood it was like 3,300, which I'm kind of guessing is my maintenance. So then the next plan was, okay, let's start to reduce the calories, but I didn't want to go into a crazy deficit, right? Because at the same time, I wanted to still push training. I had just come off the back of an injury as well, where I wasn't able to really push my strength training. So I was thinking, right, so what's the plan here? Do I decrease my calories that much that I'm not going to be able to go into the gym and actually express myself through strength training? Or do I give myself a really small deficit, but I'm going to make it a bit of a longer process? So I went for option B, which was a longer process. So I gave myself, it's like 3,100 calories, which was 200 calories per day, which for some people, they're going to say that's not really a big deficit, but you've got to take that. I was looking at a weekly overview of my macros. So you times that by 7, that's 1,400 calories per week. So I'd done that for about 6 weeks. And I wasn't really too anal about it. Like I've done like diets and stuff before where I was really tracking everything, wasn't able to go out for food. I was like, Petra, do you want to go here? And I was like, no, I'm not allowed to do any of that. I just applied the 80-20 rule. It was like, hey, if I overeat on one day, if we go out for dinner, if we go out for lunch, the next day I'm just going to make sure I'm going to try and balance that out. And I took that weekly approach instead of that one day, which really helped. And I would really recommend if anyone is planning to cut their calories, look at over a week, not just a day. Yeah. That helped me massively.
So you actually did 2 interventions when it came to calorie balance, like energy balance.
Increase,
yeah, because you actually reduced calories by 200 a day. You also increased steps. Why did you do that? Why didn't you just increase steps, keep calories the same, knowing that that would probably lead to improvements? Or why didn't you just, well, okay, we know about why you wanted to increase the steps because of all the other benefits.
Why did I not just go with one? I mean, if I was coaching, I'd probably just, if I was coaching someone, I'd probably only go for one variable.
I would just jump, can I jump in here, Liam?
Please.
I do think that we aren't good case studies for the general population because we are somewhat obsessive and have done this trip that you're talking about
many times.
so many times.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's not hard to change multiple variables at once in our quest to achieve a goal.
Yeah.
But for general population who may be doing it for the very first time, maybe they've been stuck at this barrier for a really long time. They're trying to finally create the change that they've never had. This is where we would say as coaches, okay, let's start small. One habit, one change, and then we start with that. Once we create consistency or the habit has formed, then we just move on to the next one. So I think that's an important thing we should just say for people listening. It's like, if you haven't been down this road before, if you know that you've tried this many times and you fail, or you just can't stick to it, then you're probably committing to too much. And actually we did an awesome podcast, myself, yourself, and Tammy,
about habits,
talking about habits. So if you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you do go listen to that one. Sorry to kill your tangent, but
so where was that? The two. So changing the two.
Yeah, changing the two.
I guess it wasn't just. I didn't look at them and say, right, I'm going to change those two. They just happened naturally. Like it was. I wanted to get all the benefits of my steps, getting my sunshine in, getting my learning. But then I knew that if I just decreased slightly my calories over a longer period of time, I was probably going to see some change. Now, of course, I was monitoring this. I was hopping on the InBody like every second week just to see if I was losing too much muscle mass, that would be no bueno. I didn't want to do that. If my fat mass was going down, sweet. If my body fat percentage was going down, sweet. And over the period of the 6 weeks, that's what actually happened. I actually did lose a bit of muscle mass, but then after the 6 weeks, I bumped up my calories again, and I managed to increase my muscle mass from the original point, which is pretty epic. So it was just giving myself that really small tweak to my diet that gave me massive impact, essentially.
Can I ask, did you set out and say that this is going to be 6 weeks? Yeah. So you said 6 weeks, and then what? Then you're going to reassess. So it was just monitoring over the 6 weeks. I gave myself a check-in every second week, and on the 6th week I was like, because I knew I didn't want to be, you can't be in a deficit forever, right? And I knew that towards the end, even though it was only 200 calories, but yes, 1400 calories over a week, I could start to feel my energy wasn't as good as it was. I could start to feel training. I was like, oh, I'm actually having to get pretty fired up to do this lift at 80%, which is not pretty good, right? So at the same time, it's always trying to find that balance between, yes, being in a deficit and losing weight, but also being able to push myself in the gym. And that's when I started also to play around with like actually fueling myself right before training with carbohydrates, which actually helped massively in the long run. So did you wait until the 6 week mark? So even though you were starting to feel dips in energy because of the deficit, did you wait because you'd committed to 6 weeks?
Yeah.
So you basically just kind of persevered through a bit of discomfort and then said at 6 weeks I'm going to change it, or did you make a change?
So it was about the 4.5 week where I started to feel, right, I'm starting, energy's a wee bit low, I'm not as fresh, and I can always tell when I get like brain fog, start to get foggy, I can't think clearly, that's when I know I'm under eating. And
how was your sleep?
Sleep actually okay.
Yeah, like a pretty damn good sleep.
Yeah, I've said it many times, but it definitely is my superpower. But I guess for me, the biggest signs for me essentially was energy in the gym, energy throughout the day, and just being able to focus. Like towards the end, it was very easy to get distracted, finding it very hard to actually focus on one thing. Yeah.
Okay, what weight were you at this point? So I think you started at the heaviest you've ever been is 93 kg.
I actually think I've been heavier, but my InBody, I updated my phone and I don't have the previous data from my last phone, but the current one says about 93. But I'm actually pretty sure I was heavier at one point. I think I got up to like 95.
So at the 6 week mark, what was your body weight at this point?
86 and a half.
Okay, so what did you do next? 6 weeks finishes.
So and then it was just, well, now I just want to start eating more again. So I didn't just jump into 200 calories straight away. I slowly increased it over a 1 week period. So I was back up eating that 3,300 essentially. And I knew that was back up at my maintenance. Again, I was monitoring this, right? I wasn't just going, hey, I'm at maintenance. I was checking on the InBody, is my weight increasing or am I decreasing? If my weight was still decreasing, well, I was probably still in deficit, but that wasn't the case. I was able to stay at that same weight, which was about 86 and a half at the time. And then I slowly started increasing back up to like 350 calories. And I started to gain muscle, which was pretty cool. So now my lowest or my highest ever muscle before was 42 kg. Now I'm at 44. So it was 2 kgs of muscle gained.
So basically after the deficit for 6 weeks, you start to bump up your calories. not quite to where you were, or almost where
I was,
back
like,
to where you were.
because before it was like a 3,400,
Yeah.
right?
So you're now bumping up to 3,250, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you notice that the changes then was energy,
Feeling
focus, clarity, but also just lean muscle mass.
and being able to train that bit harder, being able to give that extra couple of percent in the gym was huge.
I think those two things people forget the link between them, right? When you're dieting and you're in a deficit for a prolonged period of time, what starts to happen is that your workout starts suffering. So you can't push the workouts as much, which means you're not creating as much stress on the muscle tissue, which means you're not getting the adaptation, which is muscle growth.
Yeah.
So by bumping up your calories, especially maybe carbohydrates as well, you suddenly have more energy now. Now you can actually start pushing the weights more. You're putting more stress in the tissue. The tissue can recover better because there's food, and now muscle mass increases. I do think that's a big missing link though that people forget, right? Because they train, a lot of people train, especially weight train throughout a deficit, and they'll see reductions in body fat mass, but also muscle mass.
And that's the fine line. That's what I was always trying to juggle between. And that's why initially I didn't set out to go a 25% deficit. I could have probably went into a 25% deficit and lost like fat and body fat percentage way quicker than what I did.
Right. And I think also flipping the other end, you probably could have done even less of a deficit and maybe maintained muscle mass throughout the process more and dragged out the process.
For sure.
It just shows there's no right or wrong way to do it, as long as you're monitoring and tracking, right?
And I guess it was like, I knew that at that time I could commit for 6 weeks. And when I say I'm going to commit to something, I generally do it. So 6 weeks was a good period of time for me to be like, hey, this is 6 weeks of work. I'm going to put the effort in to try and see the results that I want. And it happened.
Okay. So this whole post is about being in the best shape of your life.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about like lifestyle and nutritional interventions. We haven't talked about training yet. Yep. We're going to talk about that now. But with regards to all of these changes and this commitment that you make over the 6 weeks, would you say that is the biggest and most focused you've been for a 6 week period in your lifetime, or have you done that before?
I've done that before for sure.
Like ticked all those same boxes?
As in the intention, yeah, that's what I set out to do, but it didn't happen the way that I wanted to do it. Right now, this time I've set out and I've actually been able to do the things that I've wanted to do. Why? Because I've made it realistic and I've made it sustainable. I've tried to do 6 weeks cuts before, but they were too aggressive. So I wasn't able to actually maintain the full 6 weeks. I got to 4 weeks in and I was like, fuck, this is too much for me. And then I just went back. I started to reverse my diet, gain weight, etc. So this is the first time that I've actually successfully implemented 6 weeks and been able to actually fully do the 6 weeks.
Okay, cool. Because I think this is important, right? Because if we're saying this is at 32 for someone who's trained pretty much their whole life, this is the best shape you've ever been in. But we're also admitting and saying this is also the most consistent and diligent and accurate you've been with nutrition and lifestyle. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Awesome. So I think we have to factor that in, right? So if you're listening to this, make sure you understand that it's not by coincidence that you ended up being in the best shape you've ever been in. Like you nailed this for the first time, probably, to the level that you really wanted the first time ever.
Years.
Yeah. So let's talk about training.
Yeah.
So did anything change with training?
I guess, well, like I said, I came off the back of an injury for my back. So before I was doing a lot of conditioning work going into the 6 weeks prior. So right around like February, March, I was doing a lot of cyclical stuff.
Because you couldn't lift.
Because I couldn't lift heavy. So I was doing a lot of hypertrophy work, a lot of conditioning. Then when it got into like the actual deficit, my back obviously was better. So I was able to strength train, but I wasn't really striving for adaptation. I was just really happy that I was able to squat and I was able to deadlift. So I was probably riding at like a 7.5, like the majority of the time. And you're probably going to say that's what you do all the time, but it was like a real 7.5. I was taking it moderate every session, which was good. And actually coincided with the deficits. It was actually perfect training for the deficits. Now, talking about training now, are we talking about that or just in...
No, let's talk about it. At the start of March 20th, when you make this commitment, what changes with your training?
Nothing much. As I said, like my training was always really consistent. Like I can jump down the stairs straight into training and I'm fine. I guess it was just being a lot more intentional with what I was doing, just upping it that extra 1% with my recovery protocols, going for a walk after training, warming up properly, cooling down properly, fueling properly, post-workout, etc. So I was building this whole thing around the training, which really helped.
So talk me through your split. What did your split look like?
So that was
Firstly, you're following the build program,
correct,
and you've built an awesome crew.
Yeah.
Excuse the pun.
Yeah,
but you've got an awesome crew here that's coming in. So people who follow the build program at Coastal Fitness, but also around Hong Kong, who are now joining you for your sessions. So you got kind of like a little posse all doing a session together, which is really cool. But what's your split looking like now?
So then it was 2 strength days, 2 hypertrophy days with the conditioning tied into those hypertrophy days, and then it was 1 just pure conditioning days over a 5-day split.
2 strength days.
Yep.
2 hypertrophy days.
Correct.
1 conditioning day altogether, but then you've also got conditioning dripped into those other sessions, or is
just the hypertrophy days?
Okay, so it's a hypertrophy and conditioning day.
Correct.
2 just strength days.
Just strength days
and a conditioning day.
Pure aerobic day.
Okay, cool. So a slight bias towards strength training.
Yep.
You've got.
I think build has always been a slight bias. Yeah.
4 sessions of the 5 have resistance training, and 3 of the 5 have conditioning in it. Okay, cool. What are you doing? Upper body, lower body splits? Are you doing full body splits?
Yeah, great question. I think that then it was we were working off the anterior, posterior. So on one day you were like squatting and pulling heavy. The next day you were like hinging and pushing, hypertrophy, strength, endurance. The following day was a rest day. Then you went into a squatting and pulling, so anterior hypertrophy. Then you went into a
hinging, pushing,
strength. And then on that Saturday was just a pure cyclical day, and we tied some core in there. So it was great.
Yeah, love that. Do you love those splits? Do you like full body, or do you prefer upper body, lower body?
It's hard to say. Sometimes you like them. Sometimes it really just depends on what mood I'm in. But I guess now we're in an upper lower split. So one day it's just upper, and then the next day it's just lower. That's good. But I find that doing a full lower body session is way more taxing than doing like the full body split, as in like the squatting and pulling, because you get to rest a bit more. But just doing that lower body is pretty taxing.
Yeah, I think lower body, upper body splits is like your lower body days always smoke you, and then your upper body day almost becomes a bit more of a recovery based day.
Correct.
So your week is definitely a lot more up and down.
Yeah.
I definitely find that with upper and lower splits, and that's what I like about full body splits is that your fatigue is consistent.
Yeah, you get a touch on everything.
You're just consistently feeling shit. No, I'm just kidding. You're just consistently feeling the same. So I think, where I think, I know there's a bit of a side tangent, but if you can't control factors in your life, like things like work and schedule and things that you do in your day, I do think upper lower body splits can be pretty brutal. Because it just means you can accept that you probably got 2 to 4 days in your week where you're going to feel shit.
Yeah, you're not walking properly.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're not making the appropriate adjustments to your day and life on those lower body days, then it can really wipe you out pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I guess it was obviously training was going really well, but I'd had my steps in, right? So I think I'd love to talk about the steps, because it's something that I think had massive impact on my body composition. It was, I realized, okay, we're having like 8 to 10 during the week, but during the weekends, I was just being a lot more consistent and a lot more intentional with the steps that I was getting outside. So over the week, I was saying, hi. Again, same approach that I took with my calories, where I was looking at the weekly basis. I'd then done that with my steps, not being too focused on the day-to-day. It was over the week. I said, right, hey, over the week, I want to be hitting like a 70 to 75, maybe 80,000 throughout the week. And that just kept me accountable. So I think that's a really good approach for people that just want to get a bit more movement in. Yes, focus on the day-to-day, but look at more of a global approach to the week with the steps.
Yeah, I would say that the takeaway for all of us when it comes to like increasing, because not many of us are at a point where we're trying to reduce the amount that we're doing, unless it's food intake probably. But I always just stick to that 10% rule. I think that's a really good way to put it, right? So if you're trying to reduce calories, don't reduce more than 10%. Yeah. If you're trying to increase steps, don't increase more than 10%. So that means if you're currently doing 5,000 steps a day, 10% of that is 500. That seems so insignificant that most people would say it's not worth it. It's either got to be 5K or 10K. That's a mindset we all have, right? But doubling your steps is massive. Huge. Yeah. That's double the time, and that's double the energy, that's double the effort. But if you increase by 10% every day, that adds up to 10% in a week. 500 every day times 7, that's 3,500 steps that you accumulate more in a week. And then you multiply that over a month. That is 40, what is it? 14,000 steps more that you do in a week just by adding that little 500. And I do think, we talked about this in our habits podcast, is that just seems too insignificant for people, that it's either like I'm not going to do it at all,
all or
I'm
nothing,
going to go
right?
all in. Yeah, but if you can take that long-term approach and just do those simple maths, like what does this equate to on the week? What does this equate to at the end of the month? What does this equate to at the end of the year if I keep on doing it? And normally that's like, it's so staggering.
Yeah, and I guess I know we talk about it all the time. We did it on the podcast. It is that approach that people are not willing to look outside the next 6 days, let alone 6 weeks or 6 months or even 6 years. But if you can really zoom out and actually, like you said, that's 35,000 steps, right? 3,500 steps. That is a lot of steps throughout your week. Just if you take that bit of a bigger approach to it, instead of just being so obsessed about that day or getting 5K, 10K, 20K, whatever it is, take a step back, all good, and just look at it over a global period, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the other piece of advice here is that, have what you did really well throughout this whole process is you tracked your changes. And I think, there's no way to know if something's successful unless you have some form of measurement system. It can be subjective for sure. I know people love saying things like, I want my jeans to fit better. And that's fantastic. Even with your jeans fitting better,
could have just been the wash or something, right?
And also like, you go through weeks where nothing changes because your jeans maybe were really tight for you and they're still tight and you can't feel that difference. And then suddenly like you come back a week later and suddenly they're a little bit loose. And it's normally in that first 3 weeks where the jeans aren't changing is when people quit. Right. So I think if you can have some form of metric where you're tracking and just seeing the most minute changes, knowing that this is contributing and moving the needle forward can be very motivating to know that you've got to keep on going.
Well, they say it's like what gets tracked gets measured, correct? And it's funny that we talk about this. We mentioned it outside. I'm reading a book at the moment, and it's all about being grounded. And there's a couple of principles in there. One's about acceptance, one's about presence, and one's about patience. So that's a principle I'm in at the moment. And they talk about this concept that so many people are like that away from being great, right? But what happens is that they give up just before. So have you ever seen like that image? I know there's like an image on Instagram that goes around all the time where it is the guy in the mine where he's in the tunnel and he's got the pick.
I think in my head, I knew you were going to say this. I think of the stone cutter. But continue.
Is it stone cutter?
Yeah.
So the guy's with the pick and he's tunneling and he's tunneling and he's tunneling, and the image below and it's the same guy tunneling. And just before he gets to the diamonds, he packs in and he leaves away. But the person beneath continues to pick away and then gets to the diamonds. And I think that's a really good analogy when it comes to life, that you've got to persevere and you've got to be patient, right?
Yeah. I always think of in Tom Cleary's Atomic Habits, he talks about the valley of latent potential. Yeah. Which is, when you start something, you see progress really fast and everyone sees that. And then you hit this kind of plateauing phase where like nothing happens, but what's actually happened beneath the surface is changes are being made and you're just waiting. Like you said, that stone cutter hits that one extra hit on the stone and the stone cracks. All right. And it's in that valley of latent potential where nothing's happening, but you're still doing the action, is where 99% of people stop. It is hard though.
It's very hard.
It's hard to know if the path that you're on is not moving you anywhere and if it's worth it. But I would say as a culture, we just don't have the patience and perseverance like we used to. And I think maybe part of that comes back to wanting to see quick fixes, instant gratification, not having delayed gratification with everything we do, knowing that we can get almost anything in the click of a finger and it's there, whether it's the postal service, whether it's Amazon. Movie, whether it's exactly. It's everything's so accessible now that we don't have that patience anymore. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess it's like in training, right? We call it the newbie gains. Like everyone, when they comes into the gym and they start training, they start seeing their body composition change. They start seeing their strength numbers going up and like, oh my God, this is great. They get to like a year and a half or maybe 2 years into the training and they're not seeing the gains that they first had, just because it takes time, right? It's like that ruler or rate of adaptation takes time, especially the longer you get into training. We talked about it outside, but it's like sometimes you can be doing, or like Olympians or people that go into the CrossFit Games, they're only actually peaking for that 1 week at the CrossFit Games. So you're essentially doing maybe 1 year, maybe some people have trained their whole life to get to that 1 week of the CrossFit Games, right? Just to see the results that they want to see and put it into performance. But they've had to go through 1 year, 2, 3, 4 years of training without seeing that the results they want. And that can be hard. And that's why it takes a lot of commitment, a lot of perseverance, and a lot of patience, right?
Yeah, and I think this is where it comes down to the importance of focusing on the process and not the outcome.
Correct.
Right? It's like, even for you, it was never actually about the outcome. And you talking about the whole story, the outcome was never, I want to be 86 kilograms and 12% body fat and have the most muscle mass I've ever had. You built the process, which was the things you want to do every day to see improvements ultimately, and to, to right the wrongs, which is what you felt at that point in time. And that's where you put your energy into, focusing on just doing those things every single day, man, charting and collecting data along the way to make sure that it was moving in the right direction.
Correct.
But it wasn't until the 6-week mark where you're like, oh shit,
that's really good.
What I'm the lightest and have the most muscle mass and I'm the leanest I've ever been. Like,
that's fucking great.
Yeah. And I think, when you're so focused on the outcome and achieving the thing, that's when progress can feel really, really slow. And I think that's where people give up, because they're not,
right?
It's disheartening and you're just not getting that result you want. So instead of focusing on the result, you got to build your process and just put your energy into that process every single day, knowing that it's going to get you there.
It's going to get there. Nice. Love it.
Liam, I think that's a great place to wrap this up.
Let's do it.
I think it's been awesome using you as a case study. And talking about your journey, which is a journey that so many of us go through multiple times in our lives. And it's cool to hear your thought process, behind it and why you made the decisions that you did. And, obviously then achieving the amazing results that you did in the end. So thank you for sharing.
Happy to share.
Till next time, my friend.
Till next time. Cheers. Bye.